Hi all. Okay, so a number of you have said to me that you have some trouble with Slim. So I'm going to take you through how to tackle Slim and actually how he's quite a straightforward character to get to grips with once you know how to go through the steps. Right then, so first things first, imagine this. You have a question such as really straightforward, discuss the character of Slim in Of Mice and Men. Okay, so you do very similar thing you do in other types of questions I've taught you. This is a character question, so you've got to think of three themes that represent that character. So it could be power, it could be friendship, it could be harshness of society. That's your third point. You could talk about disability if you wanted to. Okay, they could be your 3 points, right? So I'm going to use those as my examples. Maybe throw in like that extra one, perhaps talk about disability as we go through. Okay, right. So straight away, first off the bat, then power. Right. So power. My quote I'm going to use is Jerkline Skinner, Prince of the Ranch. I could split that into two if I wanted. So power. How does he represent the theme of power? Well, he represents the theme of power because he is seen as arguably the most powerful person on the ranch. His power comes from the respect and fairness that he shows to others. And in this way, he's really in direct opposition to someone like Curly, who gets his power, who gets his authority from fear, from intimidation of others. Yeah. You need to think as well when you're picking this quote apart that the role of a Skinner was a really highly sort of ranked role. It was very high status on the ranch. Okay, why was it? Because it was a very highly skilled sort of job, just compared to the other ranchmen and things. As well, in terms of talking about time and arguing about the importance of that, well, someone like as in John Steinbeck, the author, he really admired Skinners from his time of working on ranches. And so when he describes Skinners, he describes them in this quite idealized sort of view, almost that they're perfect in what they do and how they come across, such as a second quote I could use, that he was capable of driving 20 mules with a single line to the leaders. So he's extremely highly skilled, okay? Extremely highly skilled. He's very highly skilled. To the point that his skill is really exaggerated, that he doesn't just control 10, 15, but 20 mules with a single line, okay? What I always sort of do when I got these quotes to make sure my analysis is quite deep is I do the 5 Ws, okay? So I ask why? So why? Why is his skill exaggerated? Well, there's that link to Steinbeck. Steinbeck really admired Skinners, but also this idea that he is someone who's earned this sort of respect, this admiration from the other men as well. He hasn't bought it through money. He hasn't got it from inheriting his position, his status from his father, as Curly's done from the boss. Okay, this is earned. This is something that we can really stand back and think, okay, this is someone who really is at the height of their powers and deserves respect. Okay, if I'm going to talk then about Prince of the Ranch, well, he's almost treated like royalty, isn't he? Very sort of high status, that authority that comes with him. It's almost that he's got this presence about him that people can't help but feel in awe of him. Okay. As I move on there, I could also talk about the idea that Skinners, as well, this level, the reason he's treated with such deep respect, almost like reverence, really, is that it was one of the few positions, the Skinner, that hadn't really been replaced by the rapid mechanization of farming in the 1930s. So you had other jobs that could be sort of replaced by machines, baling up hay, things of that nature. But to control and to drive these mules, to manage all the men, he's almost like the line manager, took a heck of a lot of skill. And so this is another reason that Steinbeck talks about Slim in such sort of reverential sort of tones. Okay, moving on to second point. So I could talk about how he represents the theme of friendship, or I could talk about loneliness, sort of together in that. Okay. Now, Slim is one of the few people who actually recognizes the nature of society in the way that other men don't really associate. It's very selfish. They keep to themselves. Okay. They don't sort of they look after themselves first and foremost. They don't look for that sort of companionship in a way that Slim recognizes that George and Lenny do. So a quote I could use there is the third point from the graphic organizer, which is, ain't many guys travel around together. And he then goes on to say that maybe everybody's just scared of each other. And this shows the sort of wisdom that Slim has, that he sees that society almost has become fractured by the Great Depression. It's sort of split apart. And that's the sort of time where we should, and maybe this is Steinbeck's message, you could say, we should come together and support one another. But actually society was sort of turning in on itself. Remember when we talked about society being predatory? People didn't support one another. They just looked after themselves first and foremost in the interests of survival, like this survival of the fittest society. So he understands George and Lenny's relationship to the point he can comment on the fact that he says that Lenny isn't a mean guy and that a guy you don't need no sense to be a nice fella. He understands actually what's important in life. It's not about status and power, intimidating others, looking after just yourself. He understands the value of friendship and companionship, people being together. And actually, there's perhaps that understanding that that's what almost real love is, I suppose, isn't it? That selflessness of looking after someone else and not trying just to take things from other people. And we can see that extension of the idea of the theme of friendship because he actually offers friendship to George at the end of the novel after George has essentially been forced to kill his best friend to save him from the lynch mob. When he says the sixth quote, "A guy got to sometimes." So there's that sort of consoling of George. And he says about getting a drink with George. So he offers him that companionship. Why? Remember that sort of like the 5 whys? And I don't have to always say why 5 times, it might be 1 or 2. Or what Miss Barker says in her classes is she gets people to think, well, so what? So what that he says a guy got to sometimes. He understands what George has lost. He's lost a friend. He's had to make an incredibly difficult decision, which is going to have lasting repercussions on him. But also there's this compassion and humanity that Slim represents. And perhaps Steinbeck is trying to get across to us as in he is almost the exception to the rule of the sort of type of people you'd come across in 1930 society. He's someone that represents what we should all aspire to care about other people, not just to care about yourself. Okay, I know I'm going at a swift little pace, but there we go. A third point might be the harshness of society that Slim represents. And this is the thing, this could be your alternative point, isn't it, that you then shoot down. And here's a way it could start, yeah? Some might argue that Slim represents fairness in society, such as the fact that he seems to ignore the racial prejudice that others treat crooks with when he has any dealings with crooks. A number of people obviously call crooks the N-word, but Slim is respectful, he's polite, he talks to crooks in a way which is fair. He calls him crooks. And the fact that Crooks is so grateful and respectful, really admires sort of Slim, shows that he feels that respect from Slim. Okay, so I presented that sort of view that actually represents fairness in society, but then I'm going to shoot it down. However, I would argue that actually Slim represents harshness of society, because as much as he's an observer of society, he is also a product of it. Okay, so he shows that he can be equally as harsh because he has to be, because the world will only let him be as good as it allows him. No, the world, they've almost taken this from the Batman film, The Dark Knight, where the Joker says the world will only allow you to be as good as it wants you to be or allows you to be. Okay, so you got to almost operate within the sort of boundaries of the society you're in. Yeah. So the fact that Slim says when he's first talking about the pups he has from his dog, he says, "I drowned 4 of them right off." Okay, this is showing that the world is harsh, that only the strong survive in the society. Unfortunately, this is what Slim also understands. The strong are the only ones that can get by in this very difficult world. There's almost not enough resources to go around, and this is the sort of linking to time at this point in history. In the 1930s, with huge mass unemployment, with food kitchens being very common, shanty towns, your Hoovervilles that were set up, people having to migrate from losing their homes as a result of the Dust Bowl, to look for work, to move to places to work on other people's farms instead of losing their sort of homes because of those droughts, horrendous droughts, and losing their homes because of mortgages foreclosing. That people then had to sort of look after themselves, and resources were very scarce. The fact that he doesn't support Candy, when Candy, after trying to make a case for his dog, had his dog for so long, he looks at Slim, and this is a quote you could use. Candy looked at Slim for a long time to find some reversal, and Slim gave him none. So Slim's, and it says this in the novel as well, Slim's words were law, okay? Slim comments that dog ain't no good to himself. Wish somebody shoot me if I get old and a cripple. Well, straight away we can see here that he understands that at this point in time, Slim's fine. He is in the prime of his life. He's at this peak level of skill. He's really admired. He's got everything he needs. And this is where, again, you could do another point, as in he's already achieved his American dream. He doesn't have to strive for anything. But that's another point perhaps you could talk about. And I don't want to go off too much of a tangent, but that criticism that he will get left behind, that as he ages, and this is the idea in America, perhaps you could argue that if you are not ill, if you are not poor, you'll be fine, okay? But if you are sick, if you are ill, or don't get old as well, don't get poor, because society won't be forgiving to you. It will sort of prey on you. And Slim is fine at this point, but he realizes that if you get old, like Candy, if he gets ill, if he gets infirm, society will not look after you. The society doesn't value and look after the old. It's just unfortunate that he then doesn't offer that support to Candy. So you can be critical about him in that respect as well, okay? So the fact is he contributes to Candy's feeling of loneliness then and being isolated after the death of his dog. Okay. That was probably the third point I'd go for. Another quick point you could talk about him representing the theme of disability in the way that he recognizes the unfairness of society in discriminating those with disabilities. Obviously, the idea of being old as a disability that we just used with the quote that he says, wish somebody shoot me if I get old and a cripple, but also the idea that he recognizes mental disability in Lenny and how Lenny would be really persecuted if he were on his own. And obviously, after the death of Curly's wife, he knows that it's going to be very hard for George to continue to protect Lenny. And at one point, where the idea of George arguing, maybe I could let him go, maybe help him escape, Slim says, suppose they lock him up and strap him down. That ain't no good, George. He's the voice of sense, isn't he? The voice of reason here. He understands the nature of this difficult, harsh society. That they won't treat him with kindness. They won't treat him with understanding. George and Slim are some of the few people that actually understand that Lenny's a good person. He doesn't do bad things. He just lacks control. He's this almost strong, incredibly strong man with the mind of a child. A reference to time there, the time link, is that he knows and this is what it explores, that insane asylums, okay, mental institutions, were extremely inhumane at times in their treatment of people with mental disabilities and illnesses. It wouldn't be a good place for Lenny to end up, because the way that people viewed people with mental disabilities, they were seen as like a burden on society. So they were shut away in these mental institutions and not treated with the same compassion as perhaps the rest of society, because seen as weak, not have that understanding of how to treat them. So it wasn't really somewhere that Lenny should go. And the fact of the matter is, Slim understands that the shooting of Lenny, that is perhaps the most humane thing that George can do to look after Lane, to stop him being tortured by this lynch mob.